Hello, and welcome to a brand new day of free to play here on Magic the Gathering Arena. Get the dish on the latest with me, Lord Rumfish. Today, I wanted to go back to basics. I've offered some higher level content on the channel about drafting before, and just, some gameplay of me drafting. But I wanted to take it all the way back to the beginning. For those of you who don't feel very comfortable with drafting or who just want to check in on me and make sure I'm giving good advice. Either way, here we are. I wanted to talk about what is a draft, how to draft, and just the key basics of it. And we'll do an example draft using one of the formats on Arena. So, where my face is covering up the play button down in the bottom right corner here, we're going to click that. The events tab here with the flag is the one that we want. You might have to scroll down initially. Quick Draft is a format that lets you draft against the AI when you're picking the cards. It gives you a lot of time to think about what you're doing. So it also gives you more draft experience because it costs half as much to play these as it does to play the ones against players. You might be thinking, well, what's the cost? There's got to be a cost for being able to play twice as many drafts. And you don't need to worry about it too much, but yeah, the prizes are a little bit better if you're good at drafting. So if you draft against players, you'll win back a little bit more. Although I will say that the lower end of the curve on Quick Draft is more forgiving. So if you get somewhere between like 0 to 3 wins, then Quick Draft forgives you more if you're having a losing pattern. So that's kind of nice. But if you win a lot more, it can be better to play against players. And the other thing is that the AI is notorious for taking the rares just constantly out of the packs. So you won't be able to rare draft as much in a quick draft. But that's okay. It'll let you focus on the skill of actually drafting more so than being distracted by the rares. So, what is a draft? A draft is a limited format. We call it that because you have a limited card pool. So if you were in real life, you would sit down with 8 players at a table. You'd be one of the 8. You'd have 3 booster packs. In this case, they would be play boosters. In the past, they were draft boosters. When it's okay to begin, everyone starts by opening their first pack. You look at the cards inside. You take the one that you like the best, that you think is going to make you the best deck. Put that face down on the table. You pass the pack to the person to your left. And then the person to your right just passed you their pack that they took a card out of. And you repeat this process. You pick up the cards they passed you. You take one card out of that grouping, put it down. Then when everyone's ready, you pass that group of cards to the person to your left, and it goes on like this until everyone's taken all the cards out of the first pack. Then, in real life draft, you would normally have a chance to review the cards you've taken so far. Then you'd open up your next pack, take the one card you like best out of that, trying to build a deck, keeping in mind all the cards you've taken. And then you pass that one to the right. So it goes left for the first round, pass left, pass right for the second round, pass left for the third round. So left, right, left. And you do this until all of the cards and all of the packs have been taken. This will leave you with a pool of somewhere around 45 cards. And you get to make a deck that's 40 cards minimum. You get to add any number of basic lands that you want, which if you're in a real-life draft, the store that's hosting it will provide the basic lands. And don't worry, if you're in a real-life draft, everyone's very friendly. They'll help you with all of this. and then you construct the best 40 card deck that you can. You can go above 40 cards. Generally, the advice is try to make the best 40 card deck that you can. Try to cut the cards that you don't need until you get it down to 40, so you're only playing with your best cards. Once you get more advanced at the game, you can identify moments where it could be advantageous to go above 40. But for the moment, when you're new, stick to building the 40 card minimum. You're going to want about 16 or 17 lands in your deck. So if you have a whole lot of ways to fetch lands or creatures for like 2 mana that produce mana and that kind of thing, maybe you could go down to 16 lands. But if your mana curve, the cost of your spells, is pretty high and you have a lot of cards that cost 5 and 6 and more in your deck, you'll probably want to go for 17 lands in that case. There's even a chance you might want to go to 18 lands, but usually somewhere around the 16 to 17 land mark is about right. And that's including any non-basic lands you pick up in the draft. So then you're going to add about 23, 24 spells until it adds up to a 40 card deck. Okay, so that's what a draft is. And then in real life, you would sit down with the people in your 8-person group. It's called a pod. And you would play usually like a bracketed tournament where you play best of 3 matches that are timed to 50-minute rounds. And very often that's like, winners advance until there's only one winner left. Or it could be that you're playing in an event, in which case there could be Swiss rounds where people with similar records play against each other. And that means rather than getting knocked out of the tournament, you get to play every round. On Arena, you get something more like the Swiss rounds, where you don't get knocked out for losing. In Best of 1, which is what the quick draft is, you don't sideboard. So anyone that you play, you're only playing 1 game against them, win or lose. When you get 3 total losses, that's when you're kicked out. And you get your prizes based on how many wins. So there's something even if you just lose entirely. And winning the whole thing would be getting to 7 wins before you get to 3 losses. That's the maximum prize payout. So let's go ahead and jump into this draft to talk about how to actually build the deck and pick the cards. So it's going to cost you either 5,000 gold or 750 gems for a quick draft. That's half the price of a premier draft. So this is good for getting practice, and all of these cards are added to your collection on Arena. Alright, so now that you're in the draft, you have to figure out what's important. What are the cards that you want the most to try to build a cohesive deck? There are a lot of considerations at this point. That can be a little overwhelming, so we'll break it down into bite-sized chunks. So, first of all, if you're not familiar with the format, you're just kind of being dropped in with no idea what's going on, then in a vacuum, the cards you want to look at first are things that can win you the game by themselves, right? A card that's like an engine or just really powerful in some way that looks like it's got the potential to win the game all by itself. If you can't spot a card like that in the pack, another pretty safe pick is taking a piece of removal, something that kills a creature, like Join the Dead. Or a braid. And usually the less expensive it is on mana, the better. So creature removal, that costs somewhere between 1 to 4 mana is pretty playable. Usually 2 and 3 are kind of the sweet spot on mana. If it's more expensive than that, it might be playable, but it might not be the best card in the pack at that point. You know, sometimes you're going to play like 5 and 6 mana removal and limited, but it's good to find things that are cheap that you can cast at the same time that you're in the middle of casting your creatures. So you can be pressuring the opponent and getting on the board at the same time as you're dealing with their threats. So, Petrify is a good piece of removal here. Abrade is a good piece of removal. Join the Dead. All of these are playable. In terms of cards in this pack that look like they would win the game by themselves, Gargantuan Leech, if you could reduce the cost of this, like in a cave deck, down to a pretty cheap mana cost, a 5/5 lifelinker is something that has a lot of potential to win the game by itself. The opponent can't race with it. They need to remove it, and if they can't remove it, this could lead to a big ground stall. Or, if they try to get in with flyers, you force the issue and attack in with this leech, and they have to triple block or whatever to kill this thing. And maybe you can blow them out with a combat trick at that point. So it requires synergy to get the mana cost down to a reasonable size, but in terms of the stat line on this card, it's pretty good. If you're able to keep triggering Zoyoa, then they either have to discard or sacrifice things, or it takes 3 damage. They take 3 damage, rather. And that's something that can be pressuring their life total, can help win the game. Big creatures like these basic land cyclers are, they're kind of forgettable in some ways, but it's big. If you just need something in your deck that can close out the game, this can find you a land early. So it's nice that it has early application. And then if you happen to get this late in the game, then sure, a 6/7 with Ward. It's a fine addition to the board. I wouldn't pick this very highly, though. Nurturing Bristlebacks may be one of the better cards in the pack in terms of winning the game. It puts out 8 power and toughness worth of creatures for 7 mana. So it's pretty well on rate for what you would expect for 7 mana. But you can also forest cycle it early, and getting this on 2 bodies instead of 1 body makes it harder to deal with a single removal spell. So, all the way around, if you were looking for a good threat out of this pack, then probably like the Nurturing Bristleback or Zoyoa would be pretty fine takes here. Would be difficult to try to force the cave deck this early. This is a card that requires a bunch of setup in order to be good. And if you can't identify anything with the potential to win the game, or that has the ability to remove a creature, and removing a creature, this can be like an aggressive play to get a blocker out of your way. It can also be a defensive play to keep you alive. If you can't find any of those things, you could try to just gain card advantage in some way. So the Fanatical Offering can sacrifice an artifact or creature. You draw 2 cards and make a map token. So there are ways to get like artifacts and artifact tokens in this format. So if this pack was really truly dead and didn't have like, a Bristleback or Zoyoa or removal, if it was just a really dead pack, then you could start looking at card advantage cards as a way to try to bridge the gap. And then once you start to know the format and know the deck that you're trying to craft, then tempo and synergy comes into it. The tempo basically refers to how quickly you can deploy your threats and how quickly you can answer the opponent's threats. So if you have a lot of low mana curve things in your deck, creatures that cost 1, 2, and 3, and then it tapers off into the 4 and 5 mana mark, then you've got a pretty aggressive curve in that deck, and that's a deck that's trying to get a tempo win. Something more aggressive. And there are other ways to try to gain tempo. You could use a 2 mana spell to bounce your opponent's 6 mana creature, and that gains you tempo in the game. And then there's synergy, and synergy doesn't really line up until you've started taking some of the cards and you know what kind of deck you're crafting. So if you pick Zoyoa, you would like to be able to descend, meaning that permanent cards put into your graveyard somehow. So you'd start valuing things that mill yourself, or sacrifice permanents, or maybe discard cards. You'd start valuing all of that a little bit more highly in order to trigger the descend on this card. Or if you took the Gargantuan Leech, you would really want to find caves in order to make this a playable card. Otherwise, it could just be kind of an uncastable 8-drop. Alright, now all of that being said, there's one other thing I'll mention here. I know this is a lot to take in, but early in the draft, you don't know what colors you are yet. And don't feel like your first couple of picks locks you into your color combination. That's not true. It's good to keep an open mind and watch what people are taking as the packs come in. And if it seems like you see 2 packs in a row that just don't have much of a color, but there's a lot of other cards in another color, it could be time to jump ship and try to open up into a new lane, basically, where maybe you weren't black before, but no one's taking the black cards, so if you're the only one taking the black cards, that can make it pretty good. You know, without playing the format, you might not know that Lost Caverns of Ixalan's pretty aggressive. The white, red, and blue cards tend to be some of the better choices of this format. And then there's like a multicolor nonsense deck you can make. You can make like a green-red dinosaur deck. Or you can go for a cave deck if it's totally open. Those are things you can attempt and experiment with as you get to know the format better. But initially, it's hard to give that kind of advice because you might not know the format at all, or the format might be new. So, in that case, one of the things you can do to keep your colors open early on is you could take a safe pick. This is a colorless card. So, 2/1 Gnome for 3. When it enters the battlefield, make a map token. This card is not exciting, but it stands decent odds of making it into your final deck. Colorless cards are safer picks in that way, where they're more likely to make the cut into the final deck. In fact, if you took this Captivating Cave, that might be the safest pick of all, where it's just a land that filters mana into other colors, and if you get flooded on mana, maybe at some point you can sacrifice this thing and put 2 counters on one of your creatures. This would almost certainly make it into any deck that you take. It's just not very exciting. You could be wasting, one of your early picks in the draft on a card that's kind of low impact, even though it's guaranteed to make it into the final cut. So all that being said, what are we taking here? I think for the first pick, since I don't see a lot of game-winning engines in this pack, really, I'm leaning towards taking a piece of removal for defense. That's kind of a tempo defensive play. And if you haven't played the format before, then you might not know that black is one of the weaker colors of Lost Caverns of Ixalan. So I don't necessarily want to first pick Join the Dead with its double black pips. It's a fine card if we get into black, but at the moment I think I will take a Braid. There's a few too many ways to get out from under an aura. White and red are both strong colors. A Braid can deal with artifacts, and there are a number of problematic artifacts in the format. So, not that Petrify can't deal with artifacts, but I'm going to go with the Abrade. Alright, so again, we want to look for cards that can win the game. If none of those are obvious, then it's fine to take another like removal spell as a defensive tempo piece. If that's not available, we're going to look for card advantage. So what do we have in the pack here? Deep Cavern Bat is okay. It might not be as good in Limited as it is in Constructed. It's probably fine, though. Just black is not necessarily what you want to be gunning for early, because it's not one of the stronger colors. Canonized in Blood is highly dependent on synergy to get it started. You know, it turns on if you've descended. Or later, if you get to 7 mana, then it can make a big flyer. Kutsil. This is a 3/3 for 3. Opponent can't cast spells during your turn. That's a nice bonus. And whenever one or more creatures you control, each with power greater than its base power, deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So that may or may not trigger, but it's a 3/3 for 3 that already has a good upside of stopping your opponent from casting spells on your turn. And that means if you're running a deck that uses this card, combat tricks maybe look a little bit better, because the opponent can't necessarily interact with combat as easily. And those combat tricks could be drawing you cards. Envoy looks fine. Yeah, you get a 3/3 for 3, which is playable. Can pay 5 to make additional 1/1s. 3/2 for 3 is not quite as exciting. I think this card would be fine. Pirates are pretty good if you control an artifact. You really would like to be getting their ETB trigger. It can still be of some use in a pirate deck anyway, but you really want to be tapping something down and stunning when you're playing this card. Altasaur's alright. Doesn't seem amazing or anything. Some of these green cards are okay, but a little bit forgettable. River Herald Guide would be fine. Trades reasonably well with what the opponent's doing. Good trick. Discover lands are nice if we end up in the colors, but I think for this pack, I like Kutsil. I don't usually like to get into this many colors. The Envoy might be a safer pick in terms of how splashable it is. But this card seems more powerful overall. It's okay if you miss a pick or two early, just taking powerful cards to keep your options open. Bat's probably pretty decent. Saheeli's Lattice looks fine. I can let you rummage a bit, filter through your hand, and then eventually this turns into like a high-powered dino, perhaps. You need to have dinosaurs in your deck to do that, but somewhat playable anyway. Chart, of course, is card advantage, especially if you can be aggressive. Itzquinth is for the dinosaur deck. This is not bad even on its own. If the only dinosaur you have to target is itself, it can still do that for 4 mana. So then it can, bite something for 2 damage. That would be pretty worthwhile. Cosmium Blast is pretty strong removal. Quicksand Whirlpool is a little bit awkward. It's still usable removal. It's much cheaper if it targets a tapped creature, but if you're trying to get a blocker out of the way, it's awkward. Sunshot Militia can be a win condition. So there are a lot of ways to pile a bunch of creatures and artifacts and tokens onto the battlefield. And this can tap things down in pairs to just ping the opponent. So this is a pretty good blocker on its own. And it can run away with the game as a way to just damage the opponent. And it might honestly be one of the safer picks out of this pack. I don't know for certain that we're going to end up into red. Cosmium Blast would also be a pretty reasonable take here. One of the things you sometimes think about is what kind of signal you're sending to the people to your left about what colors are open. So we could take the Cosmium Blast, and there are still 3 more white cards in the pack. But if we take the Militia, there's the Lattice, and there's a green-red card. So red would be kind of cut off a little bit if we take the Sunshot Militia here. And that could be interesting. If we send a strong signal that red is not open, then that means we might be able to get more red cards back in Pack 2. I'm not sure what the best choice is here, but I'm going to take the Sunshot Militia. Okay, so there's another Sunshot Militia here. The other red cards in the pack are not that exciting. They don't send like a strong signal to jump into red. So even though the pack's pretty deep in red, I don't think it's that exciting for a red player. So if we take the Militia from this pack, we might be able to wheel something like the Altasaur. We'll see. Okay, so there's still a pretty good depth of black cards here, which is not too surprising. I'm not sure how they program the AI exactly, but if they're taking player data, then players would be more drawn to the stronger colors. And black is one of the weaker colors of Lost Caverns of Ixalan. If black continues to be extremely open, we could try to switch gears on what we're doing. So, the Sunfire Torches, not that exciting. It's okay. It's another thing that we can tap with the Militia in order to deal damage to the opponent. It can give a power boost, equips around for 1. This is alright. The Brazen Blade Master, if it attacks while you control 2 or more artifacts, gets +2/+1. This card is okay. Not exciting, but could be pretty aggressive if you've got artifacts kicking around. Could work for pirate synergies. We'll go ahead and take the Blade Master here. Just keep cutting into red, but if black continues to be this open, we might be looking at black as a second color. Curator of Sun's Creation, 3/3 for 4. Not that exciting. Whenever you discover again for the same value. Triggers only once each turn. We don't have any discover yet. So this would mostly just be like kind of a forgettable warm body in the deck until we find some discover cards. Bloodthorn Flail, if we end up in black, then this could be an artifact for like the Blade Master. I don't love the looks of this thing, but discarding a card can turn on Descend. It's one benefit that this card could have. Thousand Moons Crackshot looks a little bit expensive to use. So if you're deep into white and you are very aggressive, you get a 2/2 for 2. Sometimes you'll have the extra mana to tap something down. I'm actually surprised to see this Mineshaft Spider coming this late. This is actually a pretty good card, even if you're not using the mill. Just a 3/4 reach for 4 is a very good presence on the battlefield in this format. Is probably the best card in this pack. I wasn't thinking about going into red-green, but that could open up dinosaurs as a possibility. Alright, Child of the Volcano. So if you've descended, this grows to a 4/4 trampler the turn you play it, which would be a pretty good body on the battlefield. Seems a little clunky. Hidden Volcano would almost certainly make the deck at this point. It might be the take here, just as a kind of a safe pick. Glimpse the Core could be interesting if we end up in green. You know, can find a cave out of the graveyard, or can just ramp us a basic forest. Doesn't fix mana, just accelerates. Cosmium Blast is very late for white, though. I think with how late this white pick is going for this pretty good piece of removal here, I think that's the take. Hotfoot Gnome's very forgettable in this format. There's a lot of 1/1 tokens, which means this has trouble getting in. Giving something else haste can be interesting, but it's not very impressive. It's kind of a filler card. There are not a lot of great options in this pack here. You know, we could take the Disruptor Wanderglyph as a decent-sized body. We could take the Seeker of Sunlight. If we do end up into green, as a kind of a modest playable, can be exploring early. Promising Vein is a card that's going to make any deck that we're building, though. It helps us go find basic lands. We can even just keep this one on the field if we want to, and tap it for colorless. Alright, so this is our opening pack here. And it's very surprising to see the Nurturing Bristleback make it all the way back around. That could mean the dinosaurs are open. And maybe red-green is open. You know, again, the Companion and the Cave are pretty safe picks, but Bristleback is a really good card for being this late. Okay, here's a lot of green. So I guess green coming around this late, it must be somewhat open here. We do have a couple of white cards, and the Envoy is a perfectly serviceable body here. Slumber's not really what we're looking for. Stone Tree could ramp us, and later craft with a cave to be a 5/5 golem. If we end up going really big, like a big dinosaur deck, the Stone Tree could be interesting, but I think it's probably between the Staggering Size and the Envoy. I don't love combat tricks. I did say earlier that with Kutzil in the deck that combat tricks are probably a bit better. Can draw cards and such. But the Envoy just looks like a really good body that can, you know, in the absence of anything else happening in the game, we'll just keep spitting out 1/1s. So this looks like a very playable card to me. Alright, between the Slumber and the Acrobatic Leap, I think we'll take the Acrobatic Leap here. That is something that could play well with Kutzil. I mean, technically, the Slumber would work with him as well, but I like the Leap as a combat trick a little better. Okay, I don't really want to go into black here. So between the Wanderglyph and the Blowgun. So if I keep the militias in here, that can tap little stuff like the blowgun. So we could just run, equipment like this in the deck and tap it where it would normally just sit around untapped forever. And that's kind of neat. +1/+1, Death Touch on our turn, Reach on the opponent's turn. That seems fine, and it seems like a way to turn on the Blade Master and the militias. Yeah, we'll take the blowgun. Okay, if we end up in green, this is a 2-drop. Can give an attacking thing trample, including itself. Tectonic Hazard feels a little bit more like a sideboard type of card. Could clean up a bunch of gnome tokens. We'll get a little bit of a feel for the format, see if we want to try to main deck this thing. And a Sage. Now we haven't taken any blue cards yet. This one doesn't feel that strong to pull us into blue. It's neat, but, if I was in these colors, I would play it, but I'm not going to jump in. Adaptive Gym Guard looks pretty good. Now we can get a bunch of little artifact things down, and rather than pinging the opponent, we could end up just growing this thing to a massive size. And that seems pretty good. Itali's Favor is good. Maybe a little bit better in the dinosaur deck, but it's just a good card in general. Huatli's Final Strike. This is a good solid chunk of removal here. We're not necessarily lacking for removal. I'm just trying to figure out if we're going to be white-red or green-red. I doubt we would try to be all of the above. I feel like I have more synergies in place right now for artifacts than I do for dinosaurs. So I'm going to lean in the direction now for synergy purposes of seeing if I can make a white-red deck align. So with that in mind, I'm between Itali's Favor and Adaptive Gym Guard. And I think I'm going to try the Adaptive Gym Guard here. I'm going to move the green cards to the sideboard right now. This is still a direction we could go if green is open. But I want to try to focus where I'm looking with my picks right now to see if I can make a really good red-white deck. There's another Adaptive Gym Guard. I believe this is a really good card in the format. Cosmium Blast would also be fine here. I like to take proactive cards when I can, so I'm leaning towards the Gym Guard over the Cosmium Blast. So there are some kind of filler playable white cards here. Archaeologist is not the worst. Can scry or regrow an artifact from your graveyard. Whirlpool's kind of clunky removal. The Sandwing can plane cycle. It's also not an unreasonable late game kind of play. But there's Itali's Favor, and I think this is one of the stronger commons. One of the better things we can be doing. So we're going to go ahead and take it here. Alright, this is a double striker that can explore. That could be definitely good if we get more equipment or combat tricks. We do have one or two. Right, we've got like an aura, we've got the blowgun, we've got the leap. Makes a double striker look better. Tinker's Tote is probably more synergistic with what we've taken, though. So this one card puts out 3 artifacts. And that's like 1.5 activations of the Gym Guard or the Sunshot Militia. So I think we take the Tinker's Tote here. Even though Dawn Runner looks fine. Would probably play fine in the deck. Zoetic Glyph is a good strong card. But I'm not going to shift my colors that wildly at this stage of the draft. The blue players can have it. You know, there's a chance we could go back into green. I'm not going to go all the way to blue at this point. The Master's Guide Mural is also an excellent card. Would it be worth splashing? Takes 1 blue. 1 blue to craft it as well. I mean, I feel like right now I've got a pretty low-to-the-ground aggressive kind of deck, and mucking it up with a 3rd color and a 5-drop could be a big mistake, even though this card's very powerful. So I think I take the Tinker's Tote here. It's just got a ton of synergy for the deck. The Companion puts out like 2 artifacts. This puts out 3. You can even sack it later to gain life. Pretty good. Alright, there's another Gym Guard. Seems like a lot of pieces coming together for an artifact synergy deck. We probably need more Tinker's Totes to pay off some of these things that we're taking. Hopefully we'll run across them. There's another Atali's Favor. As good as this might be, I still like choosing the creature first and choosing the aura second. So if both of these are game-winning strategies, I'd rather take the one that has a body innately. Alright, this is starting to become a ridiculous number of adaptive Gym Guards. Thousand Moons Infantry. This is not a bad choice, maybe to just gum up the board. You know, a 2/4 for 3 could put a big brick wall in front of the opponent's plans. Sunshot Militia would also be another fine choice here. Just another 2-drop. Can tap down things to be pinging the opponent. This one's kind of a tough choice. Our mana curve's pretty flat right here. We've got, you know, a pretty even number of 2, 3s, and 4s. There's a limit to how many 4-drops you can play in a deck. 3 adaptive Gym Guards already looks pretty amazing. The 4th one might start to taper off a bit in effectiveness. So I think it might be safer here to go with the Thousand Moons Infantry or the Sunshot Militia. And this one untaps during each other player's untap step, which means if we tap this down for the Militia or the Gym Guard, it's untapped again to block on their turn. I think that's a synergy that we're going to go ahead and take advantage of here. Sunscribe looks fine. We've got ways to tap it, and we get scries if we do. This is maybe a little bit too much of a do-nothing artifact for me. It does synergize with the deck. And it could be pretty potent if you can craft it with an artifact. Plundering Pirate looks pretty good, gives us a treasure token. That would be two things that we can put out to tap for like the Gym Guard and the Militia. Same deal with the Compass Gnome, but I think the Plundering Pirates got a better stat line, and I like a treasure a little bit better than... Oh no, this one's not the same thing I was thinking of. This is the 2-mana gnome, where you get to find a land and put it on top of your library. Yeah, I think we just take the Plundering Pirate here. Okay, this is a bunch of cards that are not really in our colors. I don't even know if we're playing the Tectonic Hazard we've already got. We could take a Cavernous Maw on the off chance that we find a bunch of caves. And I guess I like that. This seems pretty late for Nutali's favor. Alright, we could take this piece of equipment, which we can equip around for 1 mana, which is pretty cheap. It's got the option to blow up an artifact or enchantment later if we have to. But otherwise it's just, gives +1/+1, moves around for 1 mana, we can tap it for the things in our deck. That's pretty nice. That'd be a 1 mana play, or we can go for this 3 mana play, but we've already got quite a few 3 mana plays at this stage of the game. I don't know for sure if Cartographer's Companion would even make the final cut into the deck. But at this point I feel like the hammer would. So I'm going to take the hammer. Alright, none of these are for us. We'll just take a Glowcap Lantern to fill out the collection. Okay, so there is also diminishing returns with equipment. You need creatures to put it on. Now, yes, you could take like 5 pieces of equipment in play and put them all onto one thing, but from a deck building perspective, you run the risk of not having anything to wear the equipment. So have to be a little bit cautious about that. So I think the Cartographer's Companion is a safer pick here. Puts out 2 things for us to tap. Gosh, between a Favor and a Blade Master, I guess the Favors can kind of chain together. Could be kind of ridiculous. Sideboard. Okay. We're pretty solidly white-red at the moment. Let's see what we've got here. Diamond Pickaxe is neat. It's indestructible. And whenever the equipped creature attacks, you get a treasure token that could give us more things to tap. So it does synergize with the deck. We've got this Envoy. It's another great creature. We've got the Atali's Favor. It can cascade us... Sorry, Discover. Into a bunch of other 3-drops, including more copies of itself. Volatile Wanderglyph. We're a little low on 2-drops right now. I think making... Sometimes you have to look at your mana curve, and you have to make a more disciplined pick. These Atali's Favors are not as good if you don't have a 2-drop creature to enchant them onto. And this Volatile Wanderglyph synergizes well with our deck. Whenever it taps, we can rummage, discard, and draw. So I think it's a very good pick here. There is not much for us in this pack. We could try to take a Mischievous Pup here and hope that we could bounce back something like a Tinker's Tote or Natali's Favor back to our hand. just for some kind of long-term value out of the deck. That might not be the worst. Sandwing could also be an option. It would give us a late game play and smooth out our early game with plane cycling. I think the Mischievous Pup is maybe the take here. People could be screaming at me in the comments because I don't have that much experience drafting this set. But it looks like a fine choice for where the deck's at right now. Okay, Petrify. This is a solid chunk of removal in our colors. Oh, but there's a Wanderglyph. Let's see, we've already got some removal. I think I would rather have the Wanderglyph than the Petrify at this stage. I want to be proactive. I want things that can pick up equipment or put Atali's Favor on. So I'm going to take a creature here. I think that's the synergy choice for the deck. Alright, Goblin Tomb Raider would be fine. I don't normally pick up 1-drops. It would be fine in our deck because of all the artifacts we have. It makes it a 2/2 with haste. But again, we've got another volatile Wanderglyph here, and I think that's the choice. We still need to fill out our 2-drops. So let's do it. Okay, so out of these, don't care for Idol of the Deep King. It seems a little bit overcosted. You know, it doesn't do nothing. But I feel like this is not one of the stronger cards we can take. Altasaur would be fine, but we've got a very low curve. Right, Atali's Favor has Discover 3, and that makes 3-drops, like the Envoy, kind of better choices to have running around the deck, I feel like. Okay, this one's, you know, I at some point I feel like we're starting to have too many 3-drops, and we might have to start cutting some. But still, I don't know what I would take over the Envoy out of this pack. You know, sound off in the comments, would you take a Sunfire Torch or a Panicked Altasaur here over the Envoy? Alright. Glorifier of Suffering, what do you do? On ETBs, you may sacrifice another creature or artifact. When you do, put a +1 counter on each of up to 2 target creatures, which can include himself. So he could be a 4/3, as long as you're willing to sacrifice a creature or artifact. I feel like if we had more Tinker's Totes, this would be a more obvious choice. As it is, I'm not so sure it fits with what we currently have. That being said, what else do I take in the pack? You know, you can sacrifice like a piece of equipment and put out a couple of +1 counters, and that's not bad. I guess the other choice would be Hidden Volcano. I don't really want to go all the way up to 6 for the Runaway Boulder. I feel like our curve's pretty low. Want to keep it that way. So Hidden Volcano would almost certainly make the cut into this deck. Glorifier's a little bit awkward. We have a lot of 3-drops. I think maybe I take the Volcano here. Might of the Ancestors would be middling. Doesn't really fit with the synergies of the deck that much. The Vigilance could let us tap something after using it in combat. It's not really another choice, though. There's the Tectonic Hazard, which we may not run at all. Alright, we'll take the Might. There's Natalia's Favor. Okay, we have so many 3-drops at this point, and this gnome is so forgettable. I'm going to take the Sandwing here as something to smooth out the mana. Give us a potential late game card. For the sideboard, I suppose. I mean, yeah, we've got play sets of these, so. Oltec. Oh, sorry, Otaclan. Landmark. Scry 2. Craft into a flyer whenever it attacks. Attacking creature without flying gains flying. Okay. This probably would not make the cut into the deck. I'm just going to take a hurl into history for the collection. Yeah, spelunking for, vault progress. Bloodthorn flail for the collection. Okay, so I feel like we did a pretty good job of trimming as we went. Tried to keep the final deck list pretty tight. The curve on this deck is absurdly low. There are a lot of 3-drops, though. I feel like 16 lands is the way to go, possibly 15. Right, so at 15 lands, we need 3 cuts here. I don't love combat tricks. Mischievous Pup's probably not necessary. I think the 1 toughness is pretty lackluster. Might of the Ancestors doesn't really synergize much with what the rest of the deck is doing. Alright, I think this is our deck right here. So we have 16 creatures, 10 artifacts, 15 lands, 2 instants, 11 white pips, 12 red pips. We're running effectively 8 white sources, 8 red sources with the Promising Vein. The Sandwing can plain cycle a white for us. The Volatile Wonderglyphs can come down for red and rummage for us. This feels like it should be a pretty cohesive deck. I think it would be better with more Tinker's Totes, but it looks interesting. There's a lot of Vitali's favor. Just see if we can chain off into some kind of wicked Discover deck. So this wraps up part 1. I'm just trying to do a basic draft tutorial. I hope it was helpful for everyone, and you can join me in part 2 to watch the gameplay if you like. And either way, you can like and subscribe, check out my other videos on the channel. Helps out a bunch. And until next time, never stop honing your critical thinking and empathy.